Today's video is the best fiction books of 2018. So these are my favorite books that I read in 2018. If you watched my video from what I read in November, you will know that I completed my reading goal of reading 100 books in 2018. As of right now, I'm at 105. And today's video is going to be about my favorite books that I read this year, my top 10 favorite fiction books that I read this year. Then I'll be doing another video about my top 5 non-fiction books that I read in 2018. So let's jump in. My favorite book of 2018 was actually a book that I read all the way back in January, and it's called Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. This book would not be my typical genre because, I mean, it's a romance, but it's also like a religious, like, Christian book, and that's not usually my style. I don't think I've read any other Christian style book except this one, and I absolutely loved it. I cried. I couldn't put it down. It's quite long, but I read it within, I don't know, 3 or 4 days. I just loved it. It's about this woman who's a prostitute, and then she marries this man, and it's just all about love and forgiveness and, I don't know, being a good person. It's just so good, and I can't say more good things about it. So number 1, Redeeming Love. And then my second favorite book this year was, and this is going to be on a lot of other people's lists, I think. I've already seen a couple people with it on their list. It's The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book is phenomenal. I was watching another video and they described it so accurately because they said Evelyn Hugo, it's like she's a real person. Taylor Jenkins Reid did such a good job at just creating this character who almost seems real. And it's about Evelyn Hugo. She's a very famous person, almost kind of like Marilyn Monroe fame. And she had 7 husbands throughout her life. A journalist interviews her and gets her story on her whole 7 husbands, and it's just fantastic seeing the story unravel and understanding why she had 7 husbands. It's really good. Oh, excuse me. My third favorite book of the year has to be To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. I actually loved the whole series. Like, the first and second book I loved, and the third book was good. It was a nice way to end this series. But the first and second were so good. I love the books, I love the movie, I love everything this whole enterprise has to offer. If you don't know what To All the Boys I Loved Before is, where do you live? Because everybody knows about this. It's about this half Korean, half American girl. Every time she tries to get over one of her crushes, she writes them a love letter. Her sister releases the love letters, and all the boys get them, and it's about her trying to save face after the letters are released, and it's just really good. Such a cute YA love story. Love it. And the next book, my 4th favorite book this year, was The Resurrection of Joan Ashby by Charisse Wolas. This is a very long book. I could see some people not liking this book. I could see how they could find it boring, but I thought it was fantastic. I loved Joan Ashby, the main character. I loved her story. I loved the discoveries she made throughout the story. I loved all the dynamics, like the career dynamic, the family dynamic, the relationship dynamic, and just, you know, finding yourself dynamic of the book. It was just it was written so well, and there are so many themes in it, and I'm sure there's a lot of symbolism that I don't even know about, but it was just so good. Like, to me, it kind of reminded me of a book that you would read in school, like one of those books that profs or teachers want to dissect with you because there's just so many good nuggets in there, and I just loved it. The next book, my 5th favorite book of the year, was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This was my first Blake Crouch novel, and it wasn't my last because I love Dark Matter so much. I tried reading some of his other ones. Those didn't. I read the one other one, the Pine whatever. I hated it. I gave it 1 out of 5. That was so incredibly boring. Dark Matter is not that. Dark Matter is a sci-fi, and it's about this man who is trying to reunite with his family, and he has to try to get to the specific universe that his family is in. And it's just so incredible. It's so unique. I've never read a story like that. I've never even heard of somebody speak of any kind of I've heard of the parallel universe idea, but I've never seen it in a book. I've never read it in a book. I really haven't seen it on TV the way he did it. And I thought it was just absolutely fantastic. So if you want to get into sci-fi, I highly recommend that book. It's really good. The sixth book I read, my sixth favorite book of the year, was Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. Pachinko is about a Korean woman. It starts with a Korean woman, and it goes through her family and their through their different generations, starting in Korea and then moving on to Japan, and just her life, and then how her choices have affected her sons and their life in Japan as Koreans. And it's just so good. It's kind of eye-opening for me because I don't really know a lot about, or I didn't know a lot about Korean and Japanese history. And it was interesting because, last September, October, Carlos and I were in Japan and Korea, and then I read this book in the spring, and it was just really interesting to read about Korea and Japan at that time, and knowing what I know about those countries from traveling there, and just tying it all together was a really, really good experience. I really enjoyed doing that, and it was just written so well. So well. My seventh favorite book of the year was Emma and the Night by Wendy Walker. I read this book during Spookathon, thanks to the recommendation by Kayla from Books and Lala. Emma and the Night is a thriller mystery, I guess, kind of. So good. I read it in basically a full day. The next day I only had 60 pages left because it was so good. I could not put it down. I didn't say the author. It was by Wendy Walker. It's about two sisters who go missing at the same time. One sister comes back. Where's the other sister? 3 years later. One sister comes back 3 years later. Where's the other sister? We find out, and it's so good. The ending is so good. I actually loved it so much, I want to reread it. It's so good. My eighth favorite book of the year was Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. This book, I think, is the only book, aside from To All the Boys Lived Before, because I read the whole series, but of all the books I've read this year, this is the only one I want to continue in the series with. I've read, and the books coming after this one are first books in a series, and I didn't complete those series, but Nevermore, I do want to continue in the series. It's, a lot of people do relate it to Harry Potter, and I can understand why, because it's the whole, going to a different world. There's, not magic, but the fantasy elements, and this girl's trying to get into a school, and it's just so good. And then, the villain was what really, really reminded me of Harry Potter, because it's, the Wondersmith, and he is taking away everyone's magic or everyone's powers for himself, and you can't say his name, you can't talk about him, and of course he makes a comeback, and it's just really good. It's a middle grade, but I can see people of all ages loving it. I really, really enjoyed that book, and I listened to the audiobook, which was really good. My ninth favorite book of the year was Sleeping Giant. So this is the first book in the Themis Files by Sylvain Neuvel, and I loved Sleeping Giants. It's also a sci-fi, and it's just so good because it's so mysterious. You have no idea. So basically what happens is there are a bunch of different parts found all over the world, and there's the scientist who is in charge of putting it together, and it turns into this robot thing, and it's just really, really good. I did go on to read the second book in that series, and because of that book, I'm stopping. I did not like the second book at all. Okay, not at all, but I didn't like the way it was going. And for me, this series had such potential, but I just didn't really like the direction it took. So I'm not going to continue with that series. But the first one, again, if you want to get into sci-fi, Sleeping Giants is a great way to start out. It's just such an easy read. It's fast-paced. It's sciencey, but it's not like overwhelmingly sciencey or spacey, if that makes sense. It's just this perfect balance. And it's funny. The first one is funny. And then my last favorite book of the month, my 10th favorite book, is Illuminae, which is the first book in the Illuminae Files by Amy Kaufman. Again, I really love this book. Obviously, it was my top 10 favorite books of the year. I listened to the audiobook, which I think is why I loved it so much. Because apparently reading the book, it's a little... Actually, maybe I would have enjoyed the book as well, because reading the hard copy of the book, it's just a bunch of, like... You're reading emails, you're reading messages between people, you're reading files. So it's not your traditional novel. And I loved the audiobook of it because every character had a different voice. So it's really easy to follow. And again, it was sci-fi. It's kind of weird that I had so many sci-fis. I had 3 sci-fis in my top 10. I guess that means I like sci-fi. Or I'm starting to like it because it was new to me this year as well. I never really read a lot of sci-fi before. I guess I like it. The Illuminae series was Illuminae, the first one in the Illuminae Files, is just so good. It's about that we have 2 main characters that are teenagers. Their planet was attacked. They each are on a different ship and are kind of enlisted in this space army. And of course, they're then attacked and all of this stuff, and it's lots of action, there's romance, some mystery. It's really, really good. And that's it. Those are my top 10 favorite books of 2018 that I read in 2018. I don't like to say my top 10 favorite books of 2018 because that makes it sound like they were all released in 2018, which they weren't. These are just my favorite ones that I read in 2018. I hope you liked the video. If you liked any of these books, please let me know. I would love to know what you think, if you liked them or if you hated them. And if you have any recommendations, I'm always looking for book recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.